And good afternoon. You are listening to RPO Radio. This is Cheesemondo and this is Speakeasy. And all kinds of weird and wonderful things are happening in the electronics today, and I've got no idea why. Hopefully you can all hear me. All the lights appear to be working. I've already got one person on the line. If it is your first time here, this isn't a debate or a debunking show. This is a genuine call-in show. I want to hear your paranormal supernatural stories, and we'll take it from there. I might ask you a few questions. We've had some awesome ones. I'm going to repost a video to do with a burnt-in foot that kept appearing in wood over a period of, I believe, 20 or 30 years, which is awesome. Hello to everyone who is watching right now. And hello to Facty, Now Penny, and Clive Wells, OK Boomer, Dr. Stinky, Facty, and Now Penny, and I think that's... and Gregory, I can see you in the side chat as well. So, I do have a caller on the line already, which is the first to start the show with an actual caller. So let's get into that, and I'll speak to you all about other things later on. Let's see if the electronics will hold up. Because the electronics are messing up because of the ghosts. I think that's more than likely going to be true. So this caller is... It's Mr. Now from the channel Now Opinion, and he is going to talk about a Russian conspiracy. Let's take me off, put that on, and let's see if this works. Mr. Now, are you there?
Good afternoon.
Hello, how are you doing?
I am here. Can you hear me?
I can, and all the lights suggest that people
I'm doing well.
on the webs can hear you as well.
That sounds terrific. I'm well. It's 10 o'clock in the evening here. It's Midsummer's Eve tomorrow, which is a public holiday here in Sweden. So I'm allowed to stay up a little bit late tonight.
Good. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for calling. We've talked about this a few times, and I'm really pleased that. Lots of people are calling in. I'm really pleased that you're able to call now. So you have a Russian conspiracy. Now we mentioned this in a message recently, and I think people need to hear this one. So, Mr. Now, tell us all about this Russian conspiracy.
Right. I feel that I have to have a little bit of a background story first. And maybe I just take one part of two. Let's see how far we go. But the background is, first, I grew up in the 80s, Stockholm, Sweden. And I remember it clearly as a child. The grown-ups were always talking about Russia as the big enemy, with the leaders you couldn't trust. I think it's quite common to have a natural suspicion of Russian political leaders if you grew up in the Western world during the 80s. In 1986, a Swedish power plant first detected the radioactive emissions from Chernobyl. No one was surprised that happened. That Russia kept quiet about it, and the Western world talked about it. So even after the Cold War and the fall of the Berlin Wall, I mean, we all sort of kept our suspicious attitude against the Russians. I mean, I know I did, and yeah, these things are hard. So even though I consider myself to be one of those critical thinkers, this is my weak point, Russia. I tend to believe conspiracy theories more if they're about Russian political leaders. And please don't take what I'm about to tell you as fact. See it as a story first, and make your own conclusions. But it's going to be hard, if not impossible, to actually find the truth in this, and that's why it's so difficult to talk about. First, a few years ago, a bomb went off in the second largest city in Russia, St. Petersburg. 15 people were killed. A suicide bomber blew himself up on a train that just left an underground station. People didn't really pay much attention to him. On both sides of the political spectrum, then, people were coming up with conspiracy theories. As there was big protest against Putin in Russia at this time, some conspiracy-minded protesters thought the bomb was a convenient way to tighten up security for Putin, and on the other side, on state television talk show, a nationalist said that the protesters was to blame for the bombing. So it felt like no one believed the official story. In the post-truth version of Russia, the only thing that was left was conspiracies. So how did it come to this? And I would start with Boris Yeltsin, and this will get wild very soon, so please bear with me. But do you remember Boris Yeltsin?
Yes.
Most people in the West remember him as the funny drunk president. Yeah. He famously interrupted a tennis game, and also he was the one who made Bill Clinton laugh until he started crying almost at a press conference. I mean, we all remember these famous pictures.
Yes.
And I guess in Russia, I think they have a different picture of him. People remember him for the economic mismanagement, economical inequality, and the Chechen wars, actually. Yeltsin tried to take control of this former Soviet state, Chechnya. But even though he had a huge military advantage, he still failed against the Chechen guerrilla. Sort of similar to how America failed in the Vietnam War against this kind of guerrilla tactics. So there was a peace treaty between the Chechens and Russians, and they signed it in 1996. So 3 years later, Yeltsin is still the president, but a new guy that you probably know him, a guy called Vladimir Putin. He was the prime minister. He was just announced in August of 1999. He was handpicked by Yeltsin, but he was pretty much unknown to the general public. He was a possible presidential candidate, but he polled at around 2% of the popular opinion. And that is that's terrible numbers, right? That would never, go anywhere in any country. So he had just been prime minister for a month when there was a series of bombings of apartment buildings in Russia, both in Moscow and in other cities. And hundreds of people died. And Putin, he blamed it on the Chechens. And quite immediately he started the Second Chechen War. It's kind of famous. It was an incredibly destructive war. The Russians completely destroyed the Chechen capital of Grozny. I looked it up today. The United Nations called Grozny the most destroyed city on Earth. That was in 2003. Things might have happened since then. And in Russia, the war was extremely popular, since the bombings had made everyone see red and started hating the Chechens. So Putin won the presidential election with 53% of the vote. But already back in the year 2000, some people couldn't help but wonder, did he, Putin, bomb those buildings himself to put the blame on Chechen, starting a war to get the public on his side? I mean, that sounds crazy, right? It reminds me of how some of these 9/11 conspiracy nuts think.
Mm-hmm.
I guess you can agree with me there, Cheese.
Yes, it's out. It's certainly
out there. Let me tell you a little bit more of the. Yeah, there's a. Yes. So I'm gonna tell you the conspiracy now, and I would like you to judge me and tell me that I'm wrong, because I want to be wrong, of course. So first, the factual stuff. Here's what factually happened. 4 bombs went off during a period of 14 days in Moscow and 2 other cities. So the first one was in a truck. The explosion made the entire building to collapse, and over 60 people died. A few days later, another bomb makes a 9-story apartment building to collapse, killing over 90 people. 2 more buildings was destroyed in the same way. Hundreds of people died in totality during collapsing buildings while they were asleep, crushed. It was easy to understand the general panic in the entire country. Anyone could be the target for the next explosion. Russian cities organized night patrols to stop more bombings taking place. But here's the interesting part. The government immediately blamed the bombings on Chechen guerrillas. But what would their motive be? It was 3 years after the first Chechen war. Remember, Chechnya won. They had signed a peace treaty with. They got exactly what they wanted. They had nothing to gain by performing these acts. They must have known that acts of terrorism of this scale would have led to war, right? The third bomb went off in Moscow again. However, the Speaker of the Russian Parliament said that the bomb went off in Volgodonsk. Okay, maybe a mistake, sure. But the thing is, 3 days later, an apartment building in that city, Volgodonsk, was actually blown up. And after the third bombing, or actually already after the first bombing, it's hard to imagine Chechen rebels running around in Moscow undetected with all the police checkpoints that were set up immediately everywhere. Think of the very heavy explosives, big and heavy sacks weighing over 50 kilos. How would you transport it? How would you install it without being detected? Especially when everyone was on the lookout for Chechens. And apparently, I can't really verify this, but in Russia, you can apparently detect if someone is from Chechnya or not. So how did they move around undetected? Chechens was apparently stopped on the street, beaten up. Everyone was hating Chechens at this time. It was just the fact during this period. You should look up David Satter. He's the guy that is behind most of the information I'm going to talk about now. Okay. He has written many books about Soviet Union and Russia. And he was in Moscow at the time. And his sources within the security services in Russia actually suspected that the FSB, the modern version of KGB, was behind the bombings. So they set up a meeting at a very public place, and they spoke, secretly with each other. So David's sources said that the simple fact that something called hexogen, and I don't really know what hexogen is, but the simple fact that hexogen was used in the explosions was very fishy. And why? According to the sources, hexogen was only available in one factory in Russia. And that was tightly guarded by the FSB. How could Chechen rebels get any hexogen at all, let alone in those huge quantities? And here's probably where it gets the most strange. There was a fifth bomb in the city of Ryazan. I'm not sure about the pronunciation here, but in the city of Ryazan, the official story starts to fall apart. September 22nd, 1999, 2.5 weeks after the first bomb, a resident in an apartment building saw a white car parked outside of his building where he lived. He didn't think that the license plates looked right. Now remember, everyone was on the lookout. Anything suspicious was reported, because he thought that someone had written on it on the plate. It looked like they had tried to change the numbers on the plate with a marker pen. So he calls the police. And while he waits for the local police to arrive, two men gets out of the car and they are carrying heavy sacks of something into the building's basement. And they're really quick about it. They quickly jump back into the car and they drive away really quickly before the local police shows up. So the police shows up and they go down into the basement of this building and they are terrified to see what they believe is a bomb. So they come back up and say, "Evacuate, it's a bomb here." Within hours, the entire city of Ryazan is sealed off. Military and police are everywhere, on the ground, in the air, underground. There's a huge manhunt for these two men that was in the white car. Meanwhile, the local FSB in Ryazan, they confirm that there was a detonator in the basement. They confirmed that the sacks that he saw was filled with hexogen, the exact same explosive that was used to blow up the other buildings. That's exact stuff that could only be found in an FSB guarded factory. And one day later, Prime Minister Vladimir Putin kicks off the Second Chechen War, and solely based on these bombings. Putin is quoted to have said, "The question is closed once and for all. We will pursue the terrorists everywhere. If they are in an airport, then in an airport. And forgive me, if we catch them in the crapper, then we'll rub them out in the crapper." That's what he said. And here comes the last piece of the puzzle. The war has started, but back in Ryazan, the local police finds the white car and the two suspects. They were not Chechen. They were Russian. They were FSB agents. The head of the FSB says that the whole thing was a drill, right? Okay, so all of a sudden, after the city had been under siege, now it's apparently a drill. The head of the FSB just makes that statement on national TV. And he leaves without taking any questions. Oh, wait, actually, he says one more thing. He also says that there were no explosives, no hexogen. The white powder in those bags, what was that? That was sugar. Even though the local FSB had just confirmed everything just 2 days earlier. Everything goes so quickly. Putin becomes prime minister in August. He has 2% popularity. The bombings and the war based on the bombings start in September. The war makes Putin extremely popular. And before the year is over, Boris Yeltsin resigns and appoints Vladimir Putin to be the acting president. And 3 months later, he takes the official post as president. All in all, coming from nowhere until he becomes president of Russia, it takes less than 8 months. There were trials and convictions in the aftermath of the bombings, but no open ones. The public couldn't see anything, the press couldn't see anything. And even if people were convicted, they were not Chechens. They were not FSB agents. People who tried to look deeper into the bombings has been killed or died under so-called mysterious circumstances. Putin has been quoted saying, "What? Blowing up our own apartment buildings? That is really utter nonsense. It's totally insane. No one in Russian special services would be capable of such a crime against his own people." And that concludes the details on the conspiracy. I mean, I have been convinced of this conspiracy that it's actually true for some time. When I went through it again, when I spoke to you earlier, I have sort of relived my memories of this and my thoughts about it, and I can surely understand President Biden's quote that Putin is a killer. He hasn't really explained why he says that, but I understand. What do you think? Geez, am I crazy for saying this?
I don't. I would have to look into it. Certainly, some of the things you said there. Some of the things you said there are kind of really interesting. Especially if there was a potential.
Remember, I can't really prove much.
That's the interesting part. But and there's a massive delay between us, so I'm trying not to step on you. If there was the threat of a bomb that turned out to be a bag of sugar, that is just really suspicious.
Yeah.
I don't know. I would have to look into that one a bit more. I am not. I've never paid any attention to Russian history until the day that you sent me the message saying that you had this call that you wanted to make.
Yeah.
The weird thing for me is it doesn't take a huge leap of imagination for that to be true. It's not beyond the realms of possibility. It's not outrageous, which is, I think, is probably a sign that we're living in a really bad time, that something like that is not outrageous to hear anymore.
Yes, and that's true. And just think of recent events with Navalny, poison, Russian opposition people being poisoned abroad. That is just happening more and more, and it's being denied in the same fashion as this is. So we know quite, conclusively that they are definitely putting people down that don't support the president of Russia. That is actually not a conspiracy. But to think of that someone willingly kills hundreds of people only to take advantage in the political system, to become the leader of a country, I'm not only thinking about the poor people that died in the bombings, but he also started an entire war and destroyed an entire city. No other city in the world has been as destroyed as Grozny. Just think of the casualties.
I want to be outraged, but if you look at the Gulf War and things like that, a lot of the claims up front for that turned out not to be true. I don't know. I feel like I want to look into this one. I think there's a lot I need to look into. But that is, if that was true, that should be terrifying. And unfortunately, I'm not terrified, which means that we're in a pretty sad world at the moment.
But I thought that you have guests on that talk about paranormal stories and ghosts and stuff like that. If people are terrified, I thought I would really scare you, but maybe I actually didn't succeed.
The sad thing is, it's you've got all of these things that happen all over the world where people are quite happy to commit genocide against their own people. And nobody really bats an eyelid anymore. You get the occasion, they might get an email from the United Nations that says we'd appreciate it if you didn't do that, but and occasionally, we send troops in to fix these things, but usually it's just a rather, a letter signed by 20 people that says you've been a bad boy and please don't do it again, or we're going to get really cross with you. And mostly people ignore stuff like that. Sorry, that's. I know. I've simplified it far more than I should, but in a nutshell, that's what happens: is people commit this genocide, everyone gets really upset, and then nothing ever changes.
Yeah.
And
you're right.
You can see that with.
Unfortunately, you are right.
You can see that with Belarus at the moment. Everyone is shaking their heads and please don't do this or we're going to get. It's not how you do things. Nobody's fixing it. It's still going on.
Well, I know someone who made a really good documentary about Belarus. Maybe you should watch it. It was me, by the way. I was talking about me.
You should definitely post a link to that one in the side chat, because you have the
I'll do that whenever I see the. Saw that. Thank you so much for that one.
So throw that in the side chat.
I don't know. I think I've.
And we'll try and get some people over to your channel to watch it because they should.
I'll do it later because I think I don't have YouTube open, but I will. I'll go back and listen to other callers, and I will do some commercials for my own stuff, if you don't mind. And I'm gonna listen to the other people calling in.
Awesome.
I'm excited to see what they have to say.
I've got a great call coming up next. This is somebody else who contacted me in the week, and he's calling from South Africa. So that I'm looking forward to that. But thank you so much for calling in. I will look into. I am going to look into that a little bit more because I'm interested. And that is kind of really interesting. Yeah. So I need to read a little bit about that and figure out for myself what I think happened. But that thank you so much for calling in. And definitely post links to your stuff in the side chat, and we'll try and get a few people on over to check out your Belarus documentary and everything else you do as well, which is awesome. Okie doke. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on and for listening to all that travel. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Awesome. Bye. Right. I am having a weird YouTube day today, and I am going to have to stop the stream and restart it because YouTube is having a fit. So everyone stand by your beds. This should take about 3 seconds to do, but this might buffer for a second. But if you just refresh after it buffers, we should all be good. And we're back. Sorry about that. Greg. Right, I'm going to go straight to Greg. I'm not going to talk anymore. This is not, in my opinion, this is going to be Gregory to talk about, I'm going to say Tokaloshie. Hello, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. How are you doing, sir?
I am well. I'm a bit far away. I'm in Johannesburg, South Africa, so the lag is a bit of a problem, so I just need to take that into account. But the connection here is pretty good. Yeah, when you talk about the Tokaloshie, I sort of floated it with you the other day, and it's a paranormal occurrence that many believe is attributed to a short water sprite, a imp-type creature that will come and randomly kill you and take your life during the night. The only defense for this is to sleep higher than the others. So whoever sleeps the lowest will die.
What? How? Wait, okay, where is this? Is this like a... Where has this come from? Because that would be terrifying. If you were a child in South Africa and you had to be higher than somebody else in the room, that's terrifying. That is terrifying. I know I should be more terrified at the Russian thing that we've just talked about, but the thought of being killed at random because you're close to the floor. How is this? Okay, how has this come about, and how did you learn about it?
Well, it originated.
Oh, I think we've lost you there. I'll give you a sec to figure out what's going on there. I can't hear you anymore. I'm not quite sure if you can hear me, but I guess it is a long way for a random call. While you're doing that, I'm going to say hello to people in the side chat. We've got V. Renken, Chris Durham, Tusk. Hello, Tusk. DKG. And that sounds like Greg back. Gregory. And Seek Truth. Hello, Seek Truth.
Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Sorry, it just faded out.
No worries. So, where did this come from, and how did you?
This story originates on the east coast of South Africa.
Okay.
But it's exceptionally widespread, and it's moved past South Africa. So, and I'm going to prove it scientifically still. I did promise you I'd show you scientific facts that it's actually a true story. So people would die at random times and nobody could attribute it. So the story was made up that there was a little impish character that would come and take your life. Because it seemed that people that slept higher up weren't affected. So he must be very short. Nobody quite understood it at the time. The actual explanation is very simple and straightforward. Even today, people you would go into somebody's house and you would see all their beds on bricks, because that's the only defense against this creature, is to place your bed on some cinder bricks or cinder blocks to prevent it being too low. So no matter how high your bed is, you always have to put it a little bit higher to protect yourself from this problem. And this belief has saved thousands and thousands of lives. The actual story is very, very straightforward. People living in round houses with grass thatched roofs, which is very common here, would like.
We've lost Gregory again. I don't know if you can hear me, Gregory, but your sound has dropped out again.
You there?
Yes, I can hear you again.
Hello?
Hello.
Sorry, man. It's a bit late. I'm on my cell phone, so
no worries.
It does fade out. I've just actually connected it to a different connection.
No worries.
So yes, I don't know where I left off, but yeah. So this little creature would kill you in your sleep, and the only defense is to sleep higher. So even in what you'd call very skeptical families, you'd walk into somebody's house and see all their beds on cinder bricks or paint cans or some form of elevation. Now, the reason for this problem being so bad is actually quite simple. In the traditional houses, which are round houses with grass roofs, if you lit a fire in the middle of the house and there was an inversion layer, for example, or some other atmospheric event, with the oxygen depletion, the buildup of carbon monoxide, those sleeping on the floor closest to the fire would actually end up dying of carbon monoxide poisoning. Nobody would understand it at the time. It wasn't well known to them. So the story of the Tokaloshie came about, and people that took the story seriously and would protect themselves would survive, and many would die from carbon monoxide poisoning that they just wouldn't understand. You've got to understand that this is from the 1800s. There was no education system or anything like that in Southern Africa. It was called the darkest continent for a lot of reasons. Since then, obviously, education and understanding has come about. So yes, the Tokaloshie is 100% scientific, but yet the description might be a bit fanciful and not quite true to science.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible that something that kind of folklore story has ended up saving lives. That's brilliant. I think we may have lost Gregory.
Yes, people use it to scare their children these days, and people use it in the church to build up fear of demons and things like that. So it is misappropriated. But the actual fundamentals is based very much in maybe ignorance of reality and science, but a very scientific outcome was achieved.
to think that there is actually you could look at statistics of deaths in South Africa and attribute them to a folklore myth. If you didn't take the science into account, that's great. The people closest to the floor. That is amazing. And is in South Africa, is that still a practice today? Do they still raise their beds off the floors?
Oh, many people, even in modern housing, where obviously we understand what it's about, many people still adhere to it, and people would put beds on cinder bricks, paint cans, various things like that, just to get a little bit higher off the ground. And it has, people have tales of going into clean up in motels the next morning, and people have slept the night before, and they've gone and fetched paving from the outside and put under their beds, and raised the hotel flooring, the hotel beds, just to protect themselves.
That's superb. That's really, really interesting. I can't tell. The delay is too. There's a there's a huge delay. Thank you, Gregory, for calling in. That is absolute. I'm blown away by that there is actually folklore that's ended up saving lives without people knowing the reason why. And it's quite nice that people still do it today as well. That's really quite interesting. It's cool the way people carry these things on. But
they do use it to scare children, and kids are terrified of the Tokaloshie. And I must admit, I have used it against children in the past, and I tell them if they don't behave, tonight the Tokaloshie will come and visit them. And they tend to scatter and scamper very quickly to where and return to what they should be doing.
That's superb. Well, thank you, Gregory. That's a really great call, and thank you so much for taking the time to call in as well. I can see from the side chat that other people are hello, the plot hole. I think other people didn't know that either, and that's just really blown the minds of a lot of people in side chat, I think. So
it's great. Great show. I've been watching. I think I've watched every single one of your episodes so far, and it's very intriguing.
It's good fun. It's building slowly, but it only works because people like yourself take time out to call in and tell me what they know.
That's great. I'm just sorry about the lag. There's not much I can do about that.
No,
it's a function of the globe Earth we live on.
Yes, absolutely. It's the damn curve. I'm gonna let you go. Thank you so much for calling in. That was a really great call. And if you think of anything else in future, just call back. I'd love to talk to you again. That is superb.
Will do. Thank you.
Awesome. Have a great rest of your day, and I'll speak to you soon. There we go. I've got one other person on the line at the moment. YouTube seems to be behaving itself. That was amazing. What do you? I know. Okay, so in the side chat, what do you think? Yeah, do you like my hat? It's even got my press pass on there. If I could figure out which way to look, press pass on the side. What do you all think of those two calls so far? Before we get into the third one, first of all, what do you all think about the Russian thing? And is that something that you think might be true? And the second thing is that idea that folklore has indirectly saved people from carbon monoxide poisoning because they're not too close to the floor is kind of cool. There's something cool in that. If any of you are watching at home, throw something in the comments on that one when the video's done as well. Let me just take Gregory off the screen, put me back for a second. While we're all talking, if you know anyone that has had a supernatural experience or a paranormal experience or knows a weird or wonderful conspiracy, not so much flat Earth, but I'll talk about flat Earth if we have to. I'm going to try and avoid flat Earth. But if you know about aliens or monsters, demons, any kind of weird and wonderful conspiracy that no one is aware of yet, send them the link to the show. It'll have the joining details. They can join in anytime. And they'll get a fair run here. It's not a debate or a debunking show. It's more really just I want to hear these interesting stories that people have. But there we go. I've got one more person on the line, and let's try and get to them. This should be Boomer. Are you there, sir?
Hello, tech support. Hello, tech support. What is your problem, and can I have your email address? How are you, mate?
I'm good. How are you doing?
How was our delay tonight?
It's not huge.
Not too bad. I'm wondering what our delay is like. It was painful before with our... Oh, okay. Well, I am the king of latency being through satellite. That's been really interesting. With Now Opinion, I think it was Now Opinion, with that Russian story, that did get me going a bit. I had to jot a couple of things down. First casualty of war is the truth. I think Tusk or someone missed it by the chat. It's basically to do with Putin getting into power and how there were a few suspicious occurrences happened, and then once he achieved power, obviously there's no inquiry. So a little bit on the corrupt side. And similar thing you might be aware of was the main battleship in the US back in the 1890s, I think it was, where it had a boiler accident, but they blamed it on Spain. And they used that excuse to go to war with Spain and take over some Spanish holdings off the coast of America. And the other one, I think, too, which is an interesting occurrence in that sort of false flag operations, is it's rumoured that before Pearl Harbor, they had pretty good intel that Pearl Harbor was going to be hit. Hence, they moved all the aircraft carriers out and let the raid go ahead for maximum impact in order to curry popular opinion at home. And the other one in the war casualty thing is in 1955 in the Arab-Israeli War, England and France were caught red-handed and pretty much lost their military prestige because of shenanigans. So, yeah, what Now Opinion said there really does have a base in politics, because once you get into power, no one can really do an inquiry on you, can they? So I really like that. It's a bit scary, but also it can happen. Unfortunately, it gets covered up.
That's where I know I should have been more outraged with it, but it just wouldn't surprise me if that happened. That's what got me the most, I think.
Yeah. I'm sorry, this delay is really funny. You think I'd be used to it by now, but we are worshipping our new mobile phone tower that's being built. That is our modern-day god, the new mobile phone tower. We all bow our heads when we go past it. It's hopefully getting finished soon. But look, my story, we chatted about last night, and this is one of these, I can't prove or disprove it. It's kind of a wow story. So I lived in a hotel one night at 3 o'clock. We had closed. We did the usual run around, kick all the drunks out, which takes longer than you hope, because one thing you want to do is have a beer after you've done a 8-hour shift. Anyway, as we closed the pub up, there were a few of the sort of residents and regular barflies left in what was the pool room, so we could close the bar off, and then people could just stay there, and those we knew could finish their drinks. And what happened is a couple of our friends lived across the road in the top of a flat on the top of a shop. Now, that particular night I was pretty cactus, so I sort of said see you later to them all and went upstairs, because I was living in the staff residence at the time. So I wandered upstairs about 3:30, 3:45, and sort of hit the pillow pretty quickly and went straight to sleep. Now, what had happened is I pretty quickly got into dream phase. And what had occurred is I had a very vibrant dream, which I still even remember quite clearly to this day, where I was in a 7-Eleven, quite brightly lit. The fluorescent light was unmistakable. It's so clear it was a 7-Eleven, even down to the magazine rack, and there was another customer. And as you know, when you look out of those windows, it's off into the darkness. And while I was there, the door sort of swung open, and I saw a guy, Eddie, who was one of the blokes who was actually drinking downstairs in the pub before I'd knocked off. He actually walked in, and I kind of remember looking at him straight away and like, no. I was like really angry, as in, piss off, get out of here, GGOF out of here, and really pushed him, grabbed him, manhandled him back out the door like, you are not supposed to be in here. Really pushed him out hard. And I actually remember at the time, the emotion was there, and I don't often remember emotional content in a dream. You either wake up, covered in sweat or whatever, but I remember that. And then also remembered looking over at a guy who was also in the 7-Eleven, and some people, and just, and like we were both aggravated by it. Now, I was then immediately woken up by the sound of an ambulance, which is why the dream was so vibrant, because this ambulance did the beep beep and then took off. And I thought, oh, that was a pretty strange sort of thing. And the dream sort of stuck with me. I kind of, okay, well, I absorbed it and digested it and went back to sleep. Now, the next day I sort of got up and went down. Actually, my shift at the same pub started at 7 o'clock in the evening. So I went down and sat behind the bar and set everything up. And one of the other regulars came in, or one of the other residents came in and came over and said, did you hear what happened to Eddie last night? No, go on. And he said, well, after he left here, he was running across the road, and he was pretty drunk, because he always was. He was a bit of a Doberman pup and a bit of a clumsy bastard. He was running across the road, and what had happened, this is a very wide street. This was sort of like the top of Elizabeth Street in Melbourne, and this is like 4 lanes main traffic. As he was running across the road, he mistook a motorcycle that was flying up Elizabeth Street with twin headlights as a car at some distance away. So thinking it was a car a long way away, he was running in front of it, but he was dazzled, and the bike actually hit him. Like, he was running sort of quickly. It hit him pretty much in the head and flung him around, and actually sent him flying in the air. The bike actually crashed too, and he'd hit the deck. Now, the funny thing about this was, I didn't know this with any prompting, but Eddie was attended to by ambulance people at the scene, and he died. They revived him and then quickly threw him onto the stretcher and put him into the ambulance. At the time that Eddie was actually dead and being revived was about the same time that I had seen him walk into the 7-Eleven. Hence the question, do we in our dream state have this, conscious ability to possibly meet someone who is in, the death, leaving your body state, which I presume could be very similar to dreaming? I can't prove one way or the other. I'm the ultimate cynic. I really hate that sort of stuff, and I love to jump onto it. But to me, it was very vibrant, very real, and I didn't let any information leak out about that dream. So it's not like the bloke who was telling me about it knew and was playing a practice. Now, Eddie, after I saw him a few weeks later in hospital, or that week in hospital, it did actually smash him up. It smashed his jaw. He was concussed, and it knocked him around. He couldn't remember anything. So he couldn't have even remembered that dream had it possibly happened. But that's my little sort of paranormal excuse. Can you actually, in your dream state, make contact with someone who's in the stage of dying and being revived? And I don't know if anyone else has got that sort of thing. What about you, Cheese? You know of anyone or similar stories to that?
I not exactly like that. My dad was convinced he could astral project when he was younger. And he was convinced that he saw members of the family and people like that who were other sides of the world and things. It's not a new thing, but that's it's just odd that you would have a dream of that person at exactly the right time. Now that might just be a huge coincidence, but then it might not.
Yeah. There's also other instances, like I know I've felt and other people probably do. You'll just go into somewhere and know there's a drawer over there, or there's a particular place. You might go to a job or to someone's house, and you just know where that knife drawer is, and you've never been there. And they're the sort of ones that are also kind of tricky. Are they coincidental as well? Or is it the deja vu we experience?
I've been on TikTok recently. I follow I forget the name. There's a channel who posts, funnily enough, things in black and white like this, and then they'll say what color is the bottle cap, and then they'll bring the color back up on the video, and mostly I'm getting those right. And if I didn't know better, I would think that I might be psychic or have some kind of precognitive ability. But actually, what's happening is it's the lids of things that I recognize. It's very specific lids, so it'll be like the lid to a milk bottle top, or a cap off a pill bottle, or something like that, or a gas can, things like that. And I'm looking at it, and I recognize the shape, so I remember the color. So it's not necessarily a precognitive thing. It's more about recognizing the shape and seeing it every day. Where are you on things like astral projection then? Do you think that could be a thing, or is that hogwash?
That's a funny one. Well, I'm neither a confirm nor deny type of person on that. It sounds tricky, but then again, people do say they've been aware of something straight away. Now, we can't really test or falsify that, can we? It's so hard to replicate the conditions more than once, therefore change, what is it, the independent variable? Oh my God, I sound like a flat earther. But also, we do have the standard sleight of hand. Now, you and I did a wonderful story episode last night on NASA Bunker 33. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. That was NASA Bunker 33. Not that I would just blatantly shill us like that, but the sleight of hand tricks which were exercised by the Kangaroo Gang and many thieves and many twiners. Now, one of the gentlemen we had staying at the hotel with us, he was one of these mentalists, and what was in his gig, it was actually down in Swanston Street, Mel. He played 7 games of chess simultaneously. And now that seems to me like an amazing, oh my God, how can you play 7 games of chess now and actually come out the winner? And here is the trick, and I'm going to get thrown out of the club. But anyway, what you do, the key is 7. You get 7 people set up at their tables. Now, of course, you then organise table 4, as in the middle table, to be a mediocre player. You can then have chess champions, state champions, national champions, mugs and whatever. What you then do is they are all positioned at their relative chess tables. You then play table 1 against table 5, table 2 against table 6, table 3 against table 7, and you personally play against table 4, and you choose to have a mediocre player there. So the virtue of numbers and dynamics, you will always have either 3 wins, 3 losses, and you will win the last game, or you'll have 2 draws, 2 losses, so and so, and 2 wins, etc. So what looks like an amazing, hey, I can play 7 games of chess, is actually a very clever, simple little trick of just playing each number against each other. So some people do have great sleight of hand and very clever ways of looking amazing too. So much trickery abound, but also other things you can't prove. You still there? I see you've cut out. Hello?
Hello? Okay, that's better. Sorry.
Sorry. Are you there?
I've seen a thing with operating theatres, and they put numbers on top of some of the cabinets and shelves in operating theatres. So then if a patient comes back and says they were hovering above their own body, they say, well, what was the number on top of the operating cabinet then? That's a really neat test. That's a neat test. Things like that are quite funny. But I've seen Derren Brown. He's a British mentalist, I guess, is the best way to. He's an all-round smart guy, but he's best described as a mentalist. I've seen him do that trick with grandmasters, and they couldn't figure out how he beat that many grandmasters in one room at the same time, but they were all playing each other. he was just, he was just. I think he did exactly the same thing. He actually only played one round, which he lost, but he beat everyone else because they were all playing each other. But yeah.
And look, here's the thing I love about it is I too used to watch all the things on TV about that. And Billy Connolly, who I've got to say is probably one of my favourite of all time, he's taught me more about my country's history than my history class did. He also did those great world tours of Scotland and England and the US. But he came across this thing I think it was in Wales, and it was a tree that was growing through what is a half of a sewer pipe, like a steel pipe, that was probably 2 metres in diameter, but it was a semicircle. And there's a little 1 foot circle cut in the top of it, and the tree growing through it filled right out. And he just zoomed in on it and he said, if you actually knew how they did it, it would take all the mystique away. And I thought, that's actually good, Billy. Yeah, it's sometimes better to not know how some of them do their tricks. You know, like it's better to know the magician. He appears magic. Is that perhaps the best way?
Yeah. Darren, I've seen Darren Brown live maybe 4 times in London. I think he's brilliant, but to see him do things like that blows your mind until he tells you how he did it.
Yep, and I also did have the pleasure once of when I was doing some, you'd call it steel fabrication engineering work for a place called Manpower. No, not the strippers. I wish it was, but these provided like construction stuff, and we had the kind of the honour of doing. It wasn't David Copperfield, but it was a very similar level magician who was a world touring sort of a guy. And what we had the job of doing was actually building the upper stage. Now you have your normal stage that is built in. We had to build it was actually 16 inches taller, extra bit of stage, and disguise it from the front. And we could also see areas were marked off and taped off to be removed of the chairs, because certain seats past 45 degrees from the stage will reveal how a lot of the tricks are done. So they actually lose a couple of hundred seats. But what we were doing, we were given plans with lots of wood, and there was a carpenter as well as myself, and I had to do all the hinge work. And we had to make all these little trapdoor and tunnel type things, and this whole elaborate little miniature maze, like a maze for small dog or cats. And some of the things you could work out what it was. You could say, here's the tunnel where the girl's going to climb along and appear miraculously somewhere else, or here's where an escape chute might be, or they saw someone in half or do whatever. And there were other places where you would look at the shape of it and was very specific about the shapes and needed things to drop and whatever. It was literally all the smoke and mirrors tricks. And then what happened is once we had packed up and gone out, 2 days before the show, the real guys come in who know all the tricks and put all the chemistry in, and there's a lot of CO2 for the smoke effects and things like that, and of course the black cloths, and they put up a lot of extra curtain rails, so there's a lot of black curtains moving back and forth. And the other thing we did see was there was a towel floating around on the carbon fibre strings, and these carbon fibre strings are like one thickness, a third the thickness of a human hair, and you can't see them. They don't reflect any light at all. So you could see what was a towel literally flying around the place. And it was just basically done with very good technology, chemistry, lots of little cool tricks, a bit like Heston's cookery. But, it was actually quite good to set up a magician's world touring show. We never got to send back to pull it apart, though. So we never got to see what things were installed. But there were lots of places where you could see there was going to be pulleys and a lot of things cabling and so forth. So anyway, yeah, that was a good little trick to do with magic and that little world.
Awesome.
And
awesome.
I might actually step aside. Is there someone else, or are we getting close to closey time? I think we are.
There isn't anyone else, but if we're done talking, I'll wind the show up. Unless there's something else. Is there anything to do with NASA or
here, Cheesio?
Always fun to have you. Is there anything NASA or bunkery that you want to tell us about? Anything that might be coming up?
Well, I tell you, yeah, we're doing public service announcements on Sunday. That's the US crew. Well, it's actually Saturday evening. I can't remember the things. It's sort of, about midday UTC time or whatever. It's on our website. And, of course, as you know, Arden and I do the Euros edition, which is now Wednesday, 8 p.m. UTC. And this week coming up, Gamera, the spinny turtle with flame engines, saves Tokyo from the evil Godzilla-esque clan of monsters. And I tell you what, it's pretty damn scary because I tell you what, the freeze monster, I'm still pretty, I haven't come back to my original shade of pink yet. I was watching a bit of it before and I couldn't do the whole thing. I somehow feel I'm glad we have Tokyo. So we're doing the movie next week, so that's going to be fun. We always give it a little bit of extra commentary because, as you know, some of those 60s movies did fall short in the proper commentary, so we like to keep everyone up to speed on that. So
Yeah.
Ardo and myself and whoever's we can kidnap and convince to come in, that's going to be good. So, yeah, US, and that's about it, I guess. And there's always, what's that guy, Cheesemondo? Apparently, I believe he's not paying his protection money, so he may not be doing any shows in the future. So hopefully he gets his brown paper bag of small denomination notes non-sequential, not like last time, and he probably could come back, but I'm holding grave fears for Cheesy, actually. I think the boys are not too happy about the sequence notes. So, yeah, anyway, I hope to see him again.
Awesome. Thank you so much for calling in. I'll speak to you again very, very soon.
Cheers, mate. Bye-bye.
All right, see you. Bye. And there we go. That's it. There is no one else on the lines. I am going to kill that so no one else can come on in. Thank you all so much for watching. Thank you very much to everyone who, if you have got my cat, you can keep her. I don't want her back. She's a pain in the ass. Especially with this, she's a pain in the ass. Anyway, Colin pointed out that NASA is a continuity error. I can see into the future. That's why I run a supernatural and paranormal show. If you could share this with anyone you know who's got a supernatural or paranormal story, or anyone who believes in demons or ghosts or goblins or whatever it is, alien abduction, I don't care. Thank you to everyone who's watching. And if it is your first time here, please do like and subscribe. And from the sounds of things, the police are here, so I'm going to get the hell out of here. Don't forget to share this around. Thank you again to everyone who called in today. And before they get in here, I just want to say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you all